Hello and welcome to this edition of 101 with Montgomery County Executive Mark Eldridge. I'm Lorna Virgili, and thank you. Thank you very much for watching. How are you, Mr. Eldridge?
I'm fine.
Budget is over.
That's part of being fine.
Well, let's talk about first, it's been 100 days in office, and of
Right.
course, you submitted your recommended FY20 $5.7 billion budget to County Council. Few words: progressive, prudent, delivers on campaign promises, and no tax increases. How did you get there?
It was hard. I mean, we started in December with first having to cut this year's budget by $44 million because the reconciliation at the end of the year showed that we were short. There was less revenue and more expenses, and that set us off on a difficult route. And at one point we were down pretty significantly from what our revenues were to what the likely budget was. And just when we thought we had begun to narrow it, the state came in a couple of weeks ago and said, oh, by the way, you have to write down $80 million in revenue over the next 2 years because we think tax revenue is going to be less than anticipated. So it was kind of a near constant process of revising numbers, figuring out what we could do differently. Were there other choices we could make with spending money? And it was like every day the scenario changed. It was hard.
This is a budget that focuses on early childhood education, increasing investment on transportation, economic development programs for small businesses, and other things. Let's talk about MCPS because we've heard at least discontent from one council member at least. $2.65 billion for MCPS, $51 million in additional funding, yet 12.5 below the board's request. How do we get here?
How did we get there? One was really difficult decisions to do other things in the budget, like the early child care initiative. The money has to come from someplace, and we were dealing with pretty constrained resources. Second, we talked with the school system, and there was the difference between what we gave and what they had wanted was narrower than that original ask. They had found some additional savings, and they thought that if the state budget provides what they thought it was going to provide, that some of the money would actually be coming from the state, which is not a bad thing. If the state ups its funding for county, we ought to be taking advantage of that. And it was for things that they were expanding, so it was a good match of the state increasing funding in targeted areas that the school system was interested in funding. There was still a small gap, and I think there was a view that it was manageable. And the other side of this is, for the first time, a county executive, me, gave the council $10 million to spend without designation, and for them to be able to make decisions about where they think they could put extra money. And obviously they could put a bunch of this money both there and into Montgomery College and address, if this is where people think the priority is, they can do that, and I don't have any problem. I could have done that, but we really wanted to give the county the council some latitude in spending, which is why we gave them the $10 million. I could have spent the $10 million, closed the school gap, and been done with it.
You mentioned during when you presented the budget officially in the press event, you mentioned that it corrects several long-term structural deficiencies. One of them, overtime,
Yep.
Across several county departments, including fire and rescue.
Fire.
How is that corrected?
Well, we're beginning to correct it. We're hiring 20 more personnel, and we're making a more realistic estimate of what overtime is going to be. And to be honest about this, everybody knew, for example, last year that the number in the budget for overtime was wrong. And there was no way that the department was going to come in at that number. and that the ultimate effect would be that that number then comes out of the reserves, which is what happened and was part of what contributed to our having to do a mid-year savings plan. And they actually calculated overtime on a base pay scale that wasn't even the actual base pay scale. So we're actually saying we have to use real numbers. So we're using the real pay scale. We're making a more realistic estimate for overtime. We're hiring people so that we're less dependent on overtime. Overtime is driven by the fact that we don't have as many firefighters as we have positions that need coverage. And so we historically have used overtime to cover the gap rather than hiring people. There's a debate about whether it's less expensive to use overtime than to hire somebody and pay them both the salary and the benefits. And so there's been an analysis going back and forth for as long as I've been on the council, which is 12 years, about what the most prudent way to deal with this is. But we've tipped way too far over in reliance on overtime. We're trying to tip that back.
And so it basically means hiring more fire
Yeah.
and rescue personnel,
Yeah.
basically. Okay, let's talk about the growing economy. Paves the way to support opportunities that will create and retain, attract jobs in the county, helping the small businesses.
Right.
How do you see this? We know the pilot program is going to start up county in the Regional Services Center to reach out to the small businesses. What is the county going to do different this time around that hasn't been done in the past? And then you can talk about the incubators, because you also mentioned that you
Right.
were going to take another look at the incubators.
So, I mean, this is a big change. I mean, when we created the Economic Development Corporation, which I did support, we also basically gutted the county's Economic Development Department. And the irony is that the corporation was created to deal basically with bringing trying to attract the larger businesses to Montgomery County. It wasn't meant to do the day-to-day of economic development, working with, shopping centers, working with small businesses. And when I was on the council, there were 5 of us who tried to put that back into the county's program. We weren't successful. So we're actually bringing back in a local focus at the regional service center level. We want to actually enhance services to be able to provide support to businesses, whether it's marketing support or other aspects of support for businesses. And we can talk about incubators if you want me to talk about it now.
Okay. We're talking about the Regional Business Service Hub that's going to be created, but we got to take a short break. We will be right back. Please stay tuned. More to come with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich.
The next 30 seconds can save you a lot of money. Just do your laundry in cold and stick to full loads. Auto-sleep your computers. Plug your gadgets in a power strip and switch it off when you're done. Headed out? Turn back your thermostat by 10 degrees. And drive sensibly. The more energy you save, the more money you save. Find other great tips at energysaver.gov.
If you think someone might be considering suicide or drugs, be the one to help them by taking these 5 steps. Ask, keep them safe, be there, help them connect, follow up. If you're struggling, call Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK or the 24-hour crisis center at 240-777-4000. Be the one to help. Learn more at BeTheOne.org.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back to 101 with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili. We were talking about the incubators and your administration taking a second look at the existing format.
So I think our incubators aren't as successful as they should be, and they're not being managed the way they should be. We really don't have what other people might consider a robust incubator program. And there are things that are good, and we're doing wet lab space, but it's really focused again toward the bio world. And incubators are so much more than just science and technology. And we wanted to look at what other people were doing around the country to stimulate use incubators as a way of stimulating a small business economy.
Please update me. How many do we have currently?
Well, 3, but there are some private incubators in the county as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to look at some of the private incubators. I was at one a few weeks ago, and to see what they're doing differently. We're going to bring in some people who've had experience with incubators to talk about what are the best models of incubators. But again, we're going to do a kitchen incubator. We believe that there are a lot of folks who would be very interested in starting businesses around food, and that having a kitchen incubator would be a way of helping to do that, as well as possibly, whether it's making a food product or launching a restaurant. We think we can be more present in this area than we are now. I've seen incubators that work on, light industrial models of economic development or maker spaces. And so there's a lot of stuff out there that we're really not touching. And I think if we're going to revive this economy, it's not going to be saved from the top. It's going to be saved from kind of recreating another generation of entrepreneurs. I mean, the spaces in the shopping centers used to be filled. When you drive around the county and you see the office buildings with signs, 1,000 feet for rent, 3,000 feet for rent. These used to be small spaces, small businesses that are no longer there. So we're looking at what we can do to stimulate the economy from the bottom, while at the same time continuing to try to attract some of the medium and larger companies to come here, and also to attract some small businesses in other jurisdictions to come here, convince him that we're a better place to grow. Now, the other side of that is the work we're doing on our process, reforming our business processes, both looking at what it takes to get a business started here and what you go through in the regulatory environment, and then what you go through in the code environment. If you're trying to bring an older building up to code, so you can actually open your business. We've had people raise a lot of issues about what we require, the cost of what we require, and the fact that we may be requiring things that other jurisdictions don't require. So I said a lot during the campaign, we're going to benchmark Montgomery County against the world around us and make sure that we're not an outlier and making people jump through hoops that nobody else makes them jump through.
Circling back to that kitchen incubator, do you foresee the incubators being more industry-oriented instead of commingled? And the kitchen incubator itself, would it help more smaller minority-owned businesses that do ethnic cuisine and things like that than the big restaurant chains?
Well, they're not aimed at restaurant chains. They are aimed at small local entrepreneurs. It's not just a minority thing. I mean, I had a friend who made chocolate chip cookies. I've met people who make a variety of foods and things from all ethnic groups and all classes.
All sorts of food. How about that?
All sorts of food, and and other places have done this better. When this thing started, we had gone on a tour of a facility in D.C., and they were happy to help the county because they said, you're not competition. You could do multiple of these things, and you wouldn't even saturate the market in terms of demand. And so, we started down this path in the last administration. We weren't able to get to the end of it. I'm determined that we're going to get into it this year, and you're going to start seeing us playing a presence in this world.
Let's talk about housing. $500,000 for enhancements to bolster inspections and tenants' rights. And let's talk about inspections. More funding also recommended as well for more inspectors. Do you want to see 100% inspections in most multifamily rental complexes in the county?
I really do, until we're at the point where we have certainty that well-maintained building is the norm. I mean, the problem with doing a 20% inspection is you go into a building, you inspect 20% of the units, you find a boatload of violations, you fix them. The other 80% of the units probably aren't any different than the 20% you inspected, except without an inspection, there's no order to correct the violations. And so we know there are some problem properties. This, fortunately, every landlord's not like this. I want to be really clear about this. There are plenty of landlords who maintain their properties and do what they're supposed to do. We're dealing with what are going to be problem properties, and we want to make sure that the problem properties correct their problems and that they then become good properties. I mean, I don't want to go and inspect everybody every 6 months. That's not fun. It's not good for them, it's not good for us, and it's not good for the tenants who don't have any assurance that the properties are going to be in good condition. So my hope is once we demonstrate that we really are going to do this, that people bring their properties up to code and we go back to what I would think would be a more normal relationship between the inspectors and the properties.
The trouble property list, it's already out. That was something that you advocated for when you were in county council. The properties that are, it's a rating system for most properties, from good to better to worst. Is there any way properties can get out of being really bad on that list?
Hopefully they can get out of it pretty quickly. I mean, you're going to get an inspection, you bring it up to code, you get re-inspected, 6 months later, and people go back and they find that you've actually kept it that way. They come back 6 months later, it's still good. My goal is to get people into less frequent inspections by them demonstrating that they don't need more frequent inspections. This is a two-way street. I'm not looking to do this in perpetuity. I would like to get to a point where everybody understands the expectations and they just meet them. And I think we can do that.
Okay, we got to take another short break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the Senior Home Sharing Pilot Program, Seniors as Roommates. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Did you know there are more than 10,000 county government phone numbers? But there's only one number you need to remember for non-emergency calls, 311. MC311 is Montgomery County government's online telephone information system. Need information? Have a problem or complaint? Trying to locate a county government facility? Call 311. The call center is open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The website is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Welcome back to 101 with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili. Mr. Elrich, we're talking about housing and the announcement that you made about the pilot program for seniors. Yeah. Seniors as roommates. Tell us a little bit about it. It sounds interesting, yet.
So, we've talked a lot about seniors who, for whatever reason, maybe they're, on their own now. It's only, one person of a couple surviving, or maybe it's still a couple. But who have a house that's much bigger than what they may need. They may want company. There are seniors who can't maintain their houses. They know they need to find another place to live. They may want company. It may be preferable to live with somebody than to, rent an apartment building in a whole building. So we're hoping we can, play matchmaker. So we're hoping that we can, match up, folks who've got houses and would like to have somebody else living in their house with somebody who could use a place to live and would like to live with another senior. And I'm kind of excited about it. We've talked a lot about, affordability and, some of the seniors need for additional income. This could address that problem. It could address it in a way that's less expensive. If you have to create an accessory unit, you've got to provide the bathroom and the kitchen and the basement and a bunch of other stuff. If you've got a house that's larger than you need, you could conceivably provide that space without having to do a lot of more expensive upgrades and renovations. So we'll see what kind of match there is for that. But I'm hoping that there are people who want to take advantage of this.
Lots of questions still about how that entire pilot program would work as far as matching people and background checks and maybe, and things like that.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that, the people you're matching are actually going to be able to live with each other. But I think, I think there's something that can work. I don't know whether it be widely adopted or, how widely it'll be adopted, but it's certainly worth looking at because it deals with needs we know exist. Both people who need a place to live and people who could use extra income. And with a lot of issues with seniors is the isolation. And this is one way of, eliminating some of the social isolation that people experience.
Let's talk about the Early Care Education Initiative, which you recently announced during your first 100 days of the administration. $7 million to basically give early care education to children under the age of 5-6 years of age. More than 70,000 of them here in the county. 76,000 children in that age bracket. How is this going to work? Because the county is going to start looking for providers. It's a public-private partnership. 50 providers across the county in order to absorb these children that are going to receive like a subsidy, right?
Right. So we know that there's a great need for affordable childcare in the county, not childcare, but early childhood education. We know that the cost has soared into the $20,000 to $24,000 range per child, which is unaffordable for a lot of people, not just folks in lower income brackets, but folks in middle income brackets. That's a stunning amount of money. There was a Washington Post article that highlighted, women going out of the workforce, less of a workforce because of the extraordinary costs of trying to deal with having a place for children to go. So we think there's a big need for it. And our goal this year is not to bite off more than we can effectively chew. The need's not going to be met by $7 million, but if somebody had handed me a bunch of money tomorrow, we don't have the places to put them, we don't have people ready to scale up programs, we may not have the trained staff because the requirements now are leading to far more educated child care providers with an expectation of salaries similar to what a school teacher would make. So we're not ready, even if we had money, to immediately expand it to scale. And I don't have the money to immediately expand it to scale. So a combination of the state putting more money into early childhood directly, the state just passed a bill that would increase the tax credits for parents who have to find childcare for their children. This is a big deal. So we're hoping between those two things and our ability over time to ramp up what we're able to put into it, that we'll be able to meet the need for spaces. So this year, there's the money immediately for expansion, but we're doing work on two of the specific issues, and I just met with some people this morning about this. We're looking at how do we identify spaces in the county that you could put early child care into, and being able to start then working with landlords to figure out what it would take to make these spaces available, make sure there aren't any zoning, regulatory impediments. So we had a discussion about, what would be the easy places to expand into and what are the more difficult places to expand into, and then also dealing with the supply of qualified teachers. So hopefully this gives us a year to start planning for next year's expansion. So this will be a multi-year process.
You mentioned the state. You've taken several trips to Annapolis during the legislative session. Several. Recently, the March for Our Schools. Do you think the goals are going to be accomplished?
I think there's an extraordinary agreement in Annapolis, in general, on the Kirwan Commission report. There's money that it looks like will be coming for both school construction, which if either of the bills were to pass that look like most likely candidates, could mean over the next 4 or 5 years the county would see a significant bump in construction money. Not enough to fully fill the gap we've got in construction, but enough that we could make a serious dent in it, and that there's a willingness to fund school operations. And this is all going to come down to, when they get into the funding next year, how they're going to apportion the pie. And my hope is that they make the pie larger, that it wouldn't be adequate to simply take the funds that are available and then reconfigure them and have some counties paying a lot more, like us, for this, and other counties not. We've got to have a pie that's big enough that everybody can meet the needs that they have to meet.
Let's talk about the Racial Equity and Social Justice Initiative that was recently announced with the support of County Council as well. How is that initiative really impact the county government?
So Nancy Navarro and the council are going to do listening sessions and work groups, and they're going to come up with legislation that they're going to hopefully act on in the fall. In the meantime, we'll have a department up and running that's looking at how do you apply racial equity lenses, and really what it means is making sure that every department, when they make a decision, is looking at the impact of that decision on communities, particularly minority communities and the lower income communities, to make sure that in thinking about trying to do something good, you don't accidentally do something harmful, or that you're thinking about everything that you need to do and not just what may be a few obvious things you need to do. And I think we've all seen evidence that things sometimes are more complex than they appear. And it's going to require departments to start thinking about this stuff. And I think that's a really significant change and a really positive change in the way we're going to do things.
Lots of topics, unfortunately, Mr. Elrich, we have run out of time. Congratulations on wrapping up the first 100 days. And I'm sure you're looking forward to the next 100.
Yes, as long as it doesn't have a budget in it.
But that will come up very soon.
Yes, I'll be back at that again.
All right, thank you very much. And for you watching at home, do remember, for any information, including the fiscal year 2020 operating budget for Montgomery County, do visit montgomerycountymd.gov. I'm Lorna Virgili, and thank you for watching.
In Montgomery County, we have a goal to reduce waste and recycle 70% of all waste by 2020. By recycling and reducing waste, we save natural resources and make our community even better. So recycle at home, work, school, everywhere, and keep recycling going. For more information, call the Montgomery County, Maryland Division of Solid Waste Services at 311 or visit montgomerycountymd.gov/recycling.
Keep it going.
Recycle more now.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 88 children is diagnosed with autism. That's a 1,000% increase in the last 40 years. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.